Hey, I'm Sam. Welcome to Brickwall Pictures. Today I am doing the much requested Quentin Tarantino tier list. Tarantino has been by far the most requested director. And if you're new to the channel, I've been doing tier lists on a whole bunch of filmmakers, so check the link in the description for a full playlist. The reason I held off on doing him was at first because I was worrying he didn't have enough films, because he's not like the most prolific filmmaker out there. The way I remedied that is by, instead of just including the films he directed, I'm also including other projects that he's connected with. So we have actually a pretty big spread here to work with. The other reason why I held off on doing Tarantino is because I was a little worried I wouldn't be able to be objective about his films, because when I was young and first getting into filmmaking, he was the face of what a director is to me. This is when I was younger and first getting into films. His body of work is kind of like what got me into movies with a whole lot more passion in terms of actually understanding like how they're made and whatnot. I call him my passport to cinema. Those of you who've seen his movies know that he likes to reference other movies, including lots of like foreign films and obscure films and some like forgotten films. And the way I initially expanded my cinematic horizons as a budding young cinephile was I would look up all the movies that he referenced in his movies, and I would go watch those movies. And he also has the Tarantino Presents line of films, which, if you aren't familiar, there's a bunch of DVDs and like movie posters and stuff where they put Tarantino's name on the poster to hopefully bring in a new audience to check out that movie, usually a foreign film, to bring in a new, well, not always, because they did it with Eli Roth's Hostel movies, I think, because Tarantino produced those. The idea of putting Tarantino's name on it as Tarantino Presents was just to bring in a new audience, and it was effective in that regard for me. Like, I saw Bong Joon-ho's The Host for the first time because I happened to be in a DVD store and it said Quentin Tarantino Presents The Host on the package. I saw Tony Jaa in The Protector because it said Quentin Tarantino Presents The Protector, and then I became a huge fan of Bong Joon-ho and Tony Jaa. So he was like that's why I call him my passport to cinema. So I owe the guy a lot, because I wouldn't have gotten into film history and into just general film appreciation the way I did without him. So his movies mean a lot to me in that regard. Inglourious Basterds is his World War II movie. If you don't know, the title is a play on there is an old exploitation film, because Tarantino loves his exploitation films. There is an old exploitation film called The Inglorious Basterds, and on that one, Bastards is spelt correctly. Tarantino purposefully spelt Bastards wrong on his version. He says it's just like an artistic flair. Maybe he just made a typo and didn't want to own up to it. Has anyone ever called him out on that? He does handwrite his scripts, so it's entirely possible. Didn't want to own up. Oh, I could never make a typo. It's an artistic flourish to differentiate from the other movie titled Inglourious Basterds. Sure, I get you. Inglourious Basterds is incredible in a cinematic landscape that is often super saturated with World War II movies, because there's this whole, you make a World War II movie to win an Oscar, that whole thing. In a landscape populated with dozens and dozens and dozens of World War II movies, Inglourious Basterds stands out in a wonderful way. Not just because of its revisionist history, but also just because of the style. And it's so clearly Tarantino. It's his voice, it's his style. I love the cast of characters. Every time I watch it, I still get a little thrown by Mike Myers and his British accent in that one scene. I know it's a thing Tarantino does where he'll cast a comedy actor in a role like he did with Jonah Hill in Django. I get it, I see the appeal. It never doesn't distract me though. It always pulls me out of the scene, so I think it's kind of it just doesn't work for me in that regard. It works in other stuff like Chris Tucker and Jackie Brown is excellent. It just works perfectly for me. For some reason, Mike Myers in this and Jonah Hill in Django, it always wrecks my immersion. But that's not any kind of mark against the movie. That's like the tiniest little nitpicky kind of thing. I'm not like downgrading the movie because of that or anything. Don't worry. Brad Pitt is great as Aldo Rain. Eli Roth is the most likable he's ever been by far. The whole cast of characters is just a ton of fun. And of course, Christoph Waltz, a much-deserved Oscar win for playing Colonel Hans Landa. It's a phenomenal character, and it's a really challenging role. Like, if you can find interviews with Tarantino talking about how he wrote this part that required such it like demanded a phenomenal performance and the ability to deliver dialogue as effectively in like 3 or 4 different languages. He speaks in English and German and in French and maybe even another one. Oh, and Italian in the lobby scene too. So all those different languages. And Christoph Waltz rose to that occasion. This was his big breakout role amongst American audiences, and I think most international audiences. He had, of course, been doing stuff in his home country, but none of that really broke out to like overseas audiences until Inglorious Basterds, and then he teamed up again with him, of course, in Django Unchained. And I hope they work together again in the future, because Tarantino seems to be one of the only filmmakers who gives Christoph Waltz material worthy of his abilities. Because, you know, he goes from being in Inglorious Basterds to being in, like, the Green Hornet movie. You know, it's like, I don't know. I liked him in, what was it called? Downsizing? Downsize Me? Supersize Me? What the fuck was the one with Tiny Matt Damon? I've talked about this before when I did my Mads Mikkelsen week, which you can check out. I'll pop a link to that in the description. And in that I talked about how Mads Mikkelsen is often wasted in English language productions because there's some very thinly veiled ethnocentrism at play, where if an actor has a foreign accent, they're only allowed to play villains, and usually very one-dimensional villains in crappy movies, like his Doctor Strange role, and like Waltz's Green Hornet villain. You know, the villain in that was supposed to be Nicolas Cage, apparently, but he wanted to do it with a Jamaican accent, so they said no. So Seth Rogen was like, no, you're not doing a Jamaican accent, and they had a big fight over it. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Inglourious Basterds is excellent. I think it's an S tier all the way. And I gotta mention, because I was talking about the cast, Melanie Laurent and Diane Kruger also. Both excellent. They're great in other stuff too. Like, you can check out Diane Kruger in The Fade. And Melanie Laurent is in a whole bunch of good stuff. Like, she's in Denis Villeneuve's Enemy, which I have a video essay about. She's great in Beginners, the Mike Mills movie. Inglourious Basterds ends with Aldo Rain saying, this just might be my masterpiece. And I think that's maybe a little self-referential from Tarantino declaring Inglourious Basterds as his masterpiece. And it is certainly one of them. Okay, next up is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This is his most recent film at the time of making this tier list. I also have his Once Upon a Time in Hollywood novel here. I'm not finished with it yet, as you can see from my bookmark. I'm getting toward the end there. I'm in the home stretch. I think I'm going to do a review for this eventually, so I won't say anything about it right now. But that's why it's not on the tier list. I did a video essay about this movie for Studio Binder. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it continues in that trend of revisionist history, like Inglourious Basterds did. Well, actually, it's maybe a little bit of a spoiler to even say that. I don't know. Spoilers for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I guess. I think anyone who's watching this tier list has seen it. Yeah, it's another revisionist history piece, and that ending is incredible. When I saw this movie at a premiere in LA. I saw it in the Cinerama Dome, which is a theater that is featured in the movie. You can see the Cinerama Dome in the movie. And let me just tell you, if you saw us at the premiere in the Cinerama Dome, when the Cinerama Dome came on screen, the audience went fucking ballistic. At that premiere, I got these like little booklets, and these are a lot of fun because they're like period centric. You know, they have like, this is just a really well designed like booklet. It's a really cool collectible. Wonder if this will be valuable at some point in history. But there's like, you know, stuff written about the characters as if, you know, like it's not about Leo Dio, it's about Rick Dalton, you know. There's like cigarette ads in here and stuff. It's cool. There's lots of images and stuff. Very cool. Yeah. Take a bite, feel all right. Well, red apple cigarette ad. There's a thing for the soundtrack. Oh, well, there it breaks the period correct immersion there, saying listen on Spotify, but whatever. There's a haircut ad. Pour yourself a mug of Southern hospitality, Chattanooga ale. There's a coupon for the Wolf's Tooth dog food. I will say the movie isn't quite as effective on a second watch after you know that big twist is coming. It doesn't like severely diminish things, but it is definitely a first watch kind of movie. But it's great on a first watch. Like the theater going fucking nuts. That was we talk about theater experiences. That was a great theater experience. I'm not even someone who like, I don't even really like going to the movie theater that much. I'll be perfectly honest. Most of the time I'd rather just watch a movie at home, which is probably blasphemous to a whole bunch of cinephiles. The theater experience I don't hold as precious as some cinephiles do. I will say Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is an exception to that. The theater experience was a special occasion. Tarantino describes it as like a hangout movie. You get to hang out with these characters, and they're just, they're great characters, great performances. Honestly, I think this is one of Leonardo DiCaprio's best performances. I don't know if it gets talked about in that regard, but like, it's not as showy as some of his big like Oscar nominee performances. Like, it's not as showy as The Revenant. He doesn't eat a raw bison liver in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but I think he does more compelling, subtle, character work in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I think he's a better character. Brad Pitt is like at his absolute best. He is so charming and likable. He's just a character you want to hang out with. That's why it works as a hangout movie, even though there's not a whole lot of like plot with momentum going on for a lot of the film. It's because these characters are so much fun to hang around with. I think it's really good. I don't think it's S tier worthy. I think after a first watch, if you had asked me right away, I would have said S tier, because you leave the theater buzzing from that ending. I think it's A tier though. It's still very good, but I don't think it's quite S tier. But it's definitely no lower. It's a strong A tier. Okay, next up is From Dusk Till Dawn. This one was extremely divisive when it came out. I don't know how divisive it still is. I thought it had become universally beloved over the years, but recently I've talked to a couple people just independently who both were like, oh, that one sucked. And I was flabbergasted because I absolutely love From Dusk Till Dawn. I'm not fucking around here. I'm popping it straight in the S tier. And if you're like, what the fuck, you can't put From Dusk Till Dawn in S and only put Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in A and not S, then, you know, hey, look, if we had the same opinion on every movie, I think that'd be a well suspicious. It was only recently that I realized just how influential the structure of From Dusk Till Dawn has been on my own writing. That midpoint shift, that is why it's divisive for a lot of people. A lot of people, like, they love the first half and then they just think it goes way off the rails in the second half. That's what I love about it so much. And that kind of radical subversion on a massive scale, to use one of Tarantino's own phrases, is something I'm constantly chasing in my writing. From Dusk Till Dawn does it perfectly. And I love the whole cast. Tarantino gives a great performance on this as Richie Gecko. Tom Savini as Sex Machine. Fred the Hammer Williams as what's his name, Frost, or whatever his name is. It's cool, I guess. Harvey Keitel as Jacob, the shotgun, the baseball bat and the shotgun. Crazy cool. There's the whole Sheriff Earl McGraw story. Sheriff Earl McGraw, played by Michael Parks, is a character that's in a few Tarantino movies. And if you track the chronology of it, he dies in From Dusk Till Dawn at the beginning, which means he has to live through every other movie, right? Because he can only die one time. He is also in Planet Terror, the Robert Rodriguez zombie apocalypse movie that ends with the world literally crumbling. So if you follow that chronology, and if it's all canon, it means that the world ended in Planet Terror, society completely crumbled, and then it rebuilt, and Sheriff Earl McGraw lived through all of that shit until he walked into Benny's World of Liquor and got his dome blasted off. Anyway, love From Dusk Till Dawn. I could talk way more about it, but this video is already going to be one of my longer tier lists, I think. Next up is Reservoir Dogs, Tarantino's first, like, real movie, his first, like, completed, finished, budgeted movie. And man, he came out of the gate swinging. It's just such a great script. And it makes sense as a first movie because it is so contained. It's almost entirely set in this warehouse with then like little flashes to other places. It's just so well made. The performances are fantastic. The thing with this was like a breakout role for Buscemi and for Tim Roth. Like, super impressive. The soundtrack is just so good. You know, you got the Stuck in the Middle with You song. You got the Little Green Bag song with the slow-mo walk to Little Green Bag is one of the coolest moments in all of cinema. Oh, I have made videos breaking down every reference and homage and connection for a handful of Tarantino's movies. Check the description for those because I talk way more about those movies in those videos. So I've done it for Reservoir Dogs, for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and for Kill Bill, I think are the three I've done so far. Impressive as hell as a first film, and it can't be understated just how influential it was to the world of indie filmmaking. Like, if Reservoir Dogs doesn't happen, so much of cinema changes. Like, this is a film where if you could make a time travel movie where someone went back and, you know, killed Tarantino before he made Reservoir Dogs, and the butterfly effect it would have on cinema as a whole, you can't even quantify that. Movies would not be what they are today without Reservoir Dogs and without Pulp Fiction following it up. It's another S-tier movie. Okay, My Best Friend's Birthday. This is pre-Reservoir Dogs. This is his, I think it's 16 millimeter. It might even be 8 millimeter. I think it's 16 millimeter. Tarantino made it himself, you know, like no budget. Half of the movie was lost in a fire. You know, it's like a trial run. Tarantino says, well, he's got two quotes about it. He says, I didn't go to film school, I went to films, meaning like he watched movies and took it. But he also says that his film school was trying to make a movie and failing. Like, he learned more from failing to make a movie than he ever would have from a film school. And that's what My Best Friend's Birthday is. It's a learning experience. Tarantino completionists, go ahead and watch it. You'll find some enjoyment. It's more like a curiosity piece. It's not really an enjoyable film on its own. It's probably like E. It's not a good piece of work. It's worth watching for the curiosity of it and for the like time capsule quality that it has. And next up is Pulp Fiction. It can't go anywhere other than this. Plain and simple. Again, changed the face of cinema. He was already revolutionizing like indie filmmaking with Reservoir Dogs. It kind of like sealed the deal with Pulp Fiction. It's an incredible film all around. I feel like there's nothing I can say about Pulp Fiction that hasn't been said already, so I'm just going to keep that one quick. Okay, next up is Natural Born Killers. Now this is an interesting one because Tarantino wrote the script and Oliver Stone directed it. If you look into the history of it, Tarantino wrote Natural Born Killers, True Romance, and Reservoir Dogs all before he had made Reservoir Dogs. He wrote those 3 scripts, right? He sold Natural Born Killers and True Romance, and then he made Reservoir Dogs. And they even offered him to make True Romance. I don't know if they offered him Natural Born Killers, but they offered him the chance to direct True Romance after Reservoir Dogs. And he said, no, I'll let Tony Scott do it because I wrote it to be my first movie. He said he wrote all 3 of these movies to be his first movie. He didn't want to follow it up with another of his like first movies because he needed to keep moving forward. It's an interesting way to look at it. Tarantino fucking hated what Oliver Stone did to his script. He was like, it's not my movie. They butchered it. I think he didn't even watch the whole thing. I think the story is he went to see it in a theater, like at the premiere, and he like walked out halfway through. And I don't think he ever saw the full thing. Is Natural Born Killers like an F-tier movie? No, not at all. It's not that bad. Honestly, it's a fine movie, but I think the writer hating it has to count for a lot, especially because this is a Tarantino tier list. Tarantino walked out F-tier. Sorry, Natural Born Killers, you're not really that bad of a movie, but Tarantino hates you. You're going to the F tier on the Tarantino tier list. And next up we have Death Proof. Now, Death Proof is a divisive one. I hear people say Death Proof is his worst movie. He even went on a talk show once and he made like a self-deprecating joke about how Death Proof was his misfire or something like that. And I'm like, oh, come on, Tarantino, hold your guns here. Death Proof is fucking great. So Death Proof is part of the Grindhouse double feature. Speaking of the Grindhouse double feature, I have this humongous, it's like a coffee table book for Grindhouse, the double feature. So if you don't know, Tarantino's Death Proof is one half of the Grindhouse double feature. Robert Rodriguez's Planet Terror is the first half. And then in between, there are fake trailers, which were directed by, there's an Eli Roth one, there's an Edgar Wright one, and there's a Rob Zombie one. And there's also like ads for like Acuna Boys, the restaurant, and there's ads for like, there's like fake commercials and stuff. I get why some people don't like Death Proof, because I feel like to fully appreciate Death Proof, you need to at least be a little bit familiar with the Grindhouse movies that Grindhouse is like paying tribute to and homaging and resurrecting the style of. And by that I mean the real like exploitation films of the 70s. And they started in like the 60s a little bit, but mostly the heyday was in the 70s, right? And actual Grindhouse theaters, these cheap, sleazy exploitation movies. I fucking love actual Grindhouse movies from that era. There was a couple year stretch where like I only watched those Grindhouse exploitation movies. I think you really do need to have experience with those movies as a touchstone to fully get Grindhouse. I think you should be able to enjoy it without knowing that, but to really get what Tarantino and Rodriguez are doing, if you saw Grindhouse and you didn't like it and you've never seen the old exploitation movies, it might be worth checking out, diving into that world of seedy cinema and then revisiting Grindhouse. You still might not like it. I don't want to say like that's the cure for not liking it, but I love Death Proof. I love the stuntman Mike character. I love both of the like ensemble women cast. There's like 2 of them. It kind of changes out halfway through the movie. And again, I like that structure. I fucking love Zoe Bell in this movie. Her stunt work is incredible. The whole ship's mass sequence. Tarantino said he went into this with the intent of shooting the best car chase ever shot. And it sounds pompous of him to say, but I think he fucking did it. And I have seen all of the top movie car chase, all the top car chase movies. I went back and I watched all the car chase movies referenced in this. Like I went and watched Vanishing Point and Dirty Larry, Crazy Mary, or vice versa. I think it's Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry, even though Mary's the crazy one. They kind of got it wrong in the title. I went back and watched the 7-Ups. I went and watched all those. The car chase in Death Proof is better. Those all have great car chase, don't get me wrong. I don't think there's a great movie car chase that I haven't seen. And Death Proof is the best of the best by I think, a significant margin. I don't think there's anything that comes close to beating it, except maybe the Blues Brothers car chase. That was pretty damn good. You know, you got Ronin is great, you got French Connection. I think Death Proof's better than all of them, I think. With Zoe Bell on the hood, for real, going super fucking fast down the highway, holding on the belt, letting go of the belt, spinning on the hood. It is so death-defying and crazy. No matter how many times I watch Death Proof, which I've seen it many times, that sequence is always tense as fuck. It's like, I know she's fine, I know she made it out of there, but how dangerous it looks gets me every time. If we're talking about the Grindhouse double feature package, S tier easy for me. If we're going just by my pure enjoyment of it, I love Grindhouse. It's one of my absolute favorite movies, if you want to call it the double feature itself, the whole movie. Death Proof on its own, maybe I could see putting it lower, but honestly, I feel like it's really like one of my favorite movies of his. I really love it. I can't put it below S. Yeah, the spread's looking a little ridiculous right now. Anyway, okay, Four Rooms. Four Rooms is an interesting case because it is not a fully Tarantino-directed film. Four Rooms, as the title kind of implies, is a vignette film broken up into 4 segments. Each of those 4 segments has a different director. Tarantino directs the final segment. The penultimate segment is by his buddy Robert Rodriguez. The one before that is by someone. And the one before that is by Allison Anders, I think. Oh, Alexander Rockwell is the 3rd segment. Let's talk about Four Rooms as a whole real quick, right? Opening segment. It kind of sucks. It's not good. It's a bad opening segment. Now that said, there's like bookends, there's stuff outside of the segments, like it actually has a really great opening credit sequence. It's like a Pink Panther style opening credit, like animated sequence. I love it, actually. It's really good. Once you get into the actual like first segment, the first room with there's like witches doing a love potion, it's like, fuck off, I don't like any of that. Second segment, it's a little better, but it's very forgettable. It has like one really good moment where Tim Roth's like hanging out a window and then it cuts really wide. It's got like the one good moment. Other than that, it's completely forgettable. Segment 3, Robert Rodriguez's segment, is a little rough around the edges, but it builds to such an amazing crescendo. The end of his segment makes all the build-up worth it. It's basically taking all of these elements that are like, they come up in the short, and you're like, oh, what is that? But it all builds and builds and builds to this explosive ending that is excellent. You got Antonio Banderas in there, Selma Hayek's on the TV. I don't even think you see her face, but that's her on the TV, like dancing or whatever. So Rodriguez's segment is the hilarious ending, makes it worthwhile. Tarantino's segment is the best all-around segment, which, not really a shocker there. You got Bruce Willis in there. You got Paul Calderon, I think. You got obviously Tim Roth in the main role, and he's great in this role, by the way. And then you have Tarantino himself playing a guy who's essentially, it's kind of like a remake of an old episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents. I think it was called Man from the South or something like that was the episode title. It's basically a remake of that episode, if you go back and watch that episode, for whatever reason. Anyway, Tarantino's segment is the best of the bunch. Overall, the film, though, extremely uneven. I would say half of the film is good. Half of it is not good. For that reason, I'm going to pop it in C. Next up, we have Reservoir Dogs. What? Reservoir Dogs again? No. This is the Reservoir Dogs PS2 game. You maybe didn't even know this existed. They made a PlayStation 2 game of Reservoir Dogs. Yeah, so this is a little oddity to pop in the list. There was a time when like every big movie got a video game adaptation. I feel like they don't do that as often these days. I mean, a lot of them were bad, but there were plenty of good ones too, I guess. Reservoir Dogs seems like a weird one to adapt because it's a heist movie and they have guns and there's a little bit of shooting, but it's not like an action movie. So you hear they're making a Reservoir Dogs PS2 game and you go, they're just going to stand in a warehouse the whole game? That doesn't sound very exciting. So then you think, okay, I guess that means they're going to make like a crazy action shoot 'em up kind of game. Maybe they take it in like a Kane and Lynch direction where they make it all my own or whatever. What they actually do is kind of clever. The game is built around showcasing all the stuff that isn't in the movie. So like, in the movie you never see the actual bad guys. In the game, you're in the bad guys. And then you basically play as all the different characters as they escape and you learn their fates. It's actually a pretty clever premise. The game's kind of unique in terms of like how it plays. They didn't take like the easy, lazy route. They made it's like a Strand type game, you know what I mean? Like, not literally a Strand type game, but it is like its own type of gameplay. You're a bank robber, you have guns, but the game is really geared around hostage taking primarily. So there's this whole system where like you use human shields and you maneuver with them, and it's a really interesting type of gameplay that I've never seen in another game, not to this level. It's worth playing for the curiosity. It's not very good, I wouldn't say. But also what's really funny, somehow they got the rights to Reservoir Dogs without getting the rights to the actors in Reservoir Dogs. I would have thought that would be a package deal, but they didn't. On the case, they proudly proclaim featuring the voice and likeness of Michael Madsen, right? And you go, oh cool, they got Michael Madsen. But what you've really got to realize is that what they're really saying is we didn't get the rights to the voice or likeness of any of the other characters. So not only is it not Tim Roth's voice doing Mr. Orange, Mr. Orange looks fucking nothing like Mr. Orange.
Me and Orange jumped in the car and Brown floored it. After that, I don't know what went down.
That one is every man for himself, man. As far as Mr. Blonde and Mr. Blue are concerned, I ain't got the foggiest, because once I got out, I never looked back.
Different. It's like, what's going on? It's got a good soundtrack, though. It's got, one of the good songs from it. They licensed the songs, but not the likenesses of the actors. I don't know how that works. Anyway, it's an oddity. It's interesting. I don't think it's particularly good, but it is kind of unique as far as video games go. I think C tier. Maybe D. I don't know. I'm going to leave it in C for now. Next up is Jackie Brown. Now, alongside Death Proof, Jackie Brown is like the only Tarantino movie that I... every once in a while, not always, but I every once in a while hear people talk about Jackie Brown as Tarantino's one big misfire. Oh, it's his misstep. And I don't know where the fuck people are getting that. I think Jackie Brown is incredible. It's hard to say because Tarantino is like, he's a good soundtrack compiler, I think Jackie Brown has my favorite of his soundtracks. If I'm just gonna like pop on a soundtrack of his, which I do sometimes, I always go Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, or Jackie Brown. His first three, kind of. I think Jackie Brown is the soundtrack I return to most frequently. But anyway, I love Pam Grier. Like I said, I was into all the exploitation movies. That includes all of her blaxploitation films. Jackie Brown is a modern-day blaxploitation film. That was Tarantino's intent with it. Interestingly, this is his only work that is an adaptation, which you might not even realize because it's not like talked about a whole lot. But Jackie Brown's an adaptation of an Elmore Leonard novel called Rum Punch. And in that book, there is no Jackie Brown. There's Jackie Birch, and she's a white woman. So Tarantino basically took the story, the money smuggling plot from that, and he swapped out Jackie Birch for Jackie Brown, and he made it a blaxploitation film. So that's him putting his stamp on it. Samuel L. Jackson is one of his best performances in this, as Ordell Roby is his character. Robert De Niro fully disappears into character as Louis Gara. I think it's probably his best performance of the 90s. Michael Keaton's in there. He's good. You got, what's his name? The guy who played Buck, who likes to fuck and kill Bill, he's in this. He's the other detective, and he was Uncle Jack in Breaking Bad. That actor, Michael Bowman, is that his name? No, not Bowman, Bowen. Cool seeing him. He's a good character actor. Of course, Pam Grier is the headliner. I think, though, Robert Forster is just incredible in this role. I think it's his best role. Not that I've seen every movie he's ever done, but he's just so good. He's just he does something special as Max Cherry in this movie. Something that I don't think another actor would bring to that part. And he does it with very few words, very understated, very restrained. He does so much with just his eyes, below the surface. It's a really incredible performance. Jackie Brown's really a performance piece. And of course, a showcase for Tarantino's excellent dialogue. I can see why some people don't like it as much, but for me, it's another S tier. It's honestly one of my favorites of his. I have such a hard time picking a favorite. If I had to do a top 10 Tarantino tier, or not tier list, but just a regular top 10 list, I have no fucking clue how I would order Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, and Death Proof. They're all vying for number one. The Hateful Eight. Oh, you know what I just realized? I don't have Django Unchained. Situation remedied. We now have Django Unchained. Okay, Hateful Eight was Tarantino's Western after Django Unchained. That's how I realized Django Unchained was missing. Oh, by the way, I saw Hateful Eight during the Road Show when it first came out. The whole thing with the Road Show was they were showing it in 70 millimeter, which is a special format if you don't know. Most movies are in 35 millimeter, right? Hateful Eight, he got these old lenses, these huge cameras, and shot the movie in 70 millimeter. It wasn't really enough to just shoot in 70 millimeter, because if you shoot in 70 millimeter and then they still screen it in 35 millimeter or screen it in digital, it's going to look pretty much the same, You need a special theater that's equipped with a 70 millimeter projector and a big enough screen to really get the effect of 70 millimeter. So what the Road Show was Tarantino going from city to city, bringing his movie to all the theaters that were equipped to do 70 millimeter. He might have even been bringing the equipment with him. But anyway, I got this another little collector's edition booklet thingy, big full panel images, little character bios with the cast. Here's a big full page spread of Tim Roth. Oh, it's actually 65 millimeter film capture, but then released in 70 millimeter. So it's 65 upscaled to 70. If that means anything to you. Cool images here. That's from the opening shot with that big statue. There is Michael Parks' son, is who this actor is. The roadshow version supposedly had, I think it was 14 minutes or something like that, of additional footage that Tarantino was like, it won't be in the regular theatrical release, and it won't be on any of the home video releases. If you want to see the extra 14 minutes, you gotta go see the roadshow. Because he likes doing like special things like that. It's kind of like, I think it's the same reason why Kill Bill, The Whole Bloody Affair, is like, you gotta go see it live somewhere. But then I heard Tarantino did some kind of weird recut, like mini-series version of Hateful Eight for Netflix, which I haven't watched yet. So maybe all that footage got put back in, because I think when you break it up into like 4 episodes or whatever, I think it ends up being even longer than the roadshow version, so I don't know. It is a Western, but it's also kind of like not really a Western. It's a Western time period and framing and stuff, but it's not really a Western story. It's more of like a murder mystery, kind of like Agatha Christie kind of story. The cast is great. All 8 of the Hateful Eight are excellent. Samuel L. Jackson's great. I really like Demian Bashir. He's the guy who plays Bob the Mexican. He's an actor who's kind of underrated. I think Tarantino cast him in this because he was in Robert Rodriguez's Machete Kills right before this, and they tend to like trade actors. I think they like recommend actors to each other. Demian Bashir is great. I don't think he gets enough credit. It was great to see him work with Tim Roth again, because they hadn't worked together in a while. It was great to see him work with Michael Madsen again, because again, they hadn't worked together in a while. And then they were both in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Michael Madsen's only in it very briefly, and Tim Roth actually got cut from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, so you can't even see him in it, but he was in there apparently. Walton Goggins is excellent. I love seeing Walton Goggins get more credit, because he was underrated for so long. This is a big starring role for him. He's kind of like the main character at a certain point. I mean, the main character is really Samuel L. Jackson, but then it's kind of the two of them are the two leads. You can't talk about The Hateful Eight without talking about how great Jennifer Jason Leigh is in this, and it's especially impressive that she put out The Hateful Eight and Anomalisa in the same year. One's a great vocal performance, the other's a great live action performance, so really impressive. She had a bit of a resurgence around the time this came out, and love to see it because she's a talent. Again, though, Channing Tatum is more of a distraction than anything when he shows up. You know, I see Channing Tatum and I go, oh, Channing Tatum. I don't see the character. You know what I mean? He's not bad. He's only in it for a very brief, and his death scene is fucking hilarious. I love seeing Zoe Bell again. See, Zoe Bell, I don't get distracted. Zoe Bell, I see Zoe Bell and I go, oh, cool. Channing Tatum, I see Channing Tatum and I go, what? Channing Tatum. You know, different reactions. It's similar, but you know, a little off. Hateful Eight. It's a little longer than it needs to be. It's a little slower. I like the characters, I like the dialogue. I love the score from Ennio Morricone. I think it's fantastic. The cinematography is good. I kind of feel like the confined spaces don't really, it almost kind of negates the appeal of the 70 millimeter at a certain point. You want a huge 70 millimeter print for like the landscapes and stuff like that. Traditionally, you know, you don't have to use it that way, but like usually 70 millimeter would be used for like Lawrence of Arabia, where you got these like gigantic you know, vistas and whatnot. Hateful Eight has a little bit of that, but not so much. When you're just inside with these people, it's like you can see more of their faces, and there is something to gain from that. Hateful Eight, I think it's a good murder mystery. It's not exactly like, you won't be like shocked by the outcome of it, you know. And I like the characters, there's lots of great moments, but I don't think it rises to the heights of his other, of his earlier films. For me, I think it might actually be B tier. I could go as high as A. It just doesn't quite excel in a lot of the areas that his other movies do. But anyway, now we're on to Django Unchained. Django Unchained is great. This is a Western, a very much spaghetti Western influenced Western. I don't know if it can really be called a spaghetti Western since it wasn't made in Italy. I don't know if it's definitely spaghetti Western influenced and styled. Django Unchained, similar to Inglourious Basterds. Django is a pre-existing Western. This one's less of like a, it's kind of just taking the name, like if you can go back to the original Django movies. There's actually multiple of them starring Franco Nero, who is in the movie. I think everyone already knows this, but the original Django from the old spaghetti Westerns, Franco Nero is the guy at the bar who, you know, Django spells his name and he's like, yeah, I know how you fucking spell it, which is a cool little reference. He's also in John Wick Chapter 2. He's the guy in the Continental, the Winston of the Italian Continental, when John Wick goes there for his hit and him and Cassian bust through the window. That is Franco Nero, the original Django.
Do I need to remind you that there will be no business conducted on the Continental grounds?
Jamie Foxx in the titular role, he's great. Christoph Waltz is great. Again, it comes so close to feeling contrived that Tarantino got a German character in here somehow, just so Christoph Waltz can be in it again. It kind of feels like he's going way out of his way to get him in there, but it comes close to that, but it doesn't actually bridge into that territory. He justifies it enough. And then it ties into like Broomhilda and whatnot, who I will say, if there's any weak link on the cast, I don't think she's bad, but Kerry Washington feels like, and it might not even be her fault, it might be on the writing, that character feels like it needed a little more to it. And then you got Leo Dio as Calvin Candy. Fantastic performance. Him and Christoph Waltz were both nominated for Best Supporting Actor at the Oscars for it. It's always kind of cool to see when two actors in the same movie are competing against each other in the same category. Again, Leo Dio is like incredible in this role. I think Tarantino has got some of DiCaprio's best work out of him. It's also not often you see him playing a villain. You know, like he's always like leading man, pretty much. Like, what other villain has DiCaprio played? I can't even think of another one. I really like the two roles from James Remar. I think that's fun. James Remar is an underappreciated character actor. He's at the beginning when Christoph Waltz, or when Dr. King Schultz, I should say, first frees Django, kills the guys who are transporting that chain gang. And then he's also one of Calvin Candy's, like, heavies. He's the guy with the double-barrel shotgun who, actually, he's the one who kills Dr. King Schultz, is the second James Remar. And their character names, because I know too much about Tarantino, his first character's name is Ace Speck, and his second character's name is Butch Pooch. My brain should not be occupied with that information, but it is, and I can't get it out. Play me in Tarantino trivia, man. I'll take you down. The action is great. Whenever it pops up, the Candyland shootout in particular is by far the best shootout Tarantino's ever shot. Tarantino always has like bursts of violence and action, but he never really makes like action movies, except for, I guess you could call Kill Bill Volume 1 an action movie, and you could call Django an action movie. The other ones have moments of action without ever being, like I wouldn't call Inglorious Basterds an action movie, even though there is a fair bit of action. Anyway, that Candyland shootout is great. There's tons of great action in it. I love Tarantino's cameo where he's doing that Australian accent as the LaQuaint Dickey Mining Co. guy, and he gets blown up. I think that's a fun cameo. Soundtrack's good again. It's not one of my favorite of his soundtracks, but it is good. It's one of the instances where Tarantino has used original music made for the movie, which he resisted for a long time, but then he did it in, there's a tiny bit of it in the first Kill Bill, actually in both Kill Bills. I think there's a little bit. Like RZA did a little original score, and Robert Rodriguez actually did a little score as well. Django's great. It really feels like an epic story, like epic in scope. It's long, but it's so well paced. It could seem like a criticism to say that it feels kind of episodic, but I actually really like that about it. It definitely feels like, you know, when Django's going around taking down those three brothers at the different plantations and stuff, it kind of feels like, oh, that's the whole movie. And that's before you even get to Calvin Candy. And then there's like a whole other act. And then even after the Candyland shootout, like that feels like a climax. But there's a whole other arc where, you know, Django gets taken away to the LaQuaint Dickey guys, and then he comes back and rescues. There's just so much story here. And it all works very, very well. It's great. I don't think it's quite S tier, but it is A tier. It's so close to S tier though. True Romance. This is the other one that Tarantino wrote but did not direct. It was directed by Tony Scott, Ridley Scott's brother. Unlike Natural Born Killers, where Tarantino walked out of it, Tarantino liked True Romance. He really liked what Tony Scott did with it. And yeah, I think Tony Scott did a great job. I think True Romance is very good. I don't think it's as good as most of Tarantino's directed work though. It just doesn't quite connect with me in that way. I haven't found it as rewatchable as Tarantino's directed movies. But it is really good, and it has a couple great sequences. Like the ending is great. That fight scene between Patricia Arquette and Gandolfini in the motel room is so good. That's like one of Tarantino's best written fight scenes. I don't know how much Tony Scott added to that, but it's a really great, really tense action sequence. There's some good stuff in there, like Christopher Walken's very memorable in his supporting role. Same with Dennis Hopper. Tarantino has said that Sicilian scene, that conversation between Hopper and Walken, is like his self-described best scene he's ever written. I don't agree with that. I don't really know why he would pick that as his best written scene, but whatever. It almost feels like Christian Slater's character is almost like a Mary Sue character for Tarantino. Is like a self-insert film buff, loving Sonny Chiba guy who gets the girl of his dreams, like a wish fulfillment thing. That part of it feels a little off to me. because I don't like the Mary Sue characters. Not that that's really what this is, but it definitely feels, it's got the whole Elvis thing. Tarantino was like a big Elvis nut. It definitely feels like Tarantino's kind of writing himself into the movie a little bit with that character, which isn't, it's not inherently a problem, but I just kind of don't like author insert characters. True Romance, very good. I don't think it's as good as most of his movies. I think it's B tier for me. And next up we have Kill Bill. Whoa, Jesus Christ. I was going to do them separately, but let's just talk about Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2. Because I don't think I've ever watched one volume without watching both of them together. Now, that being said, I've never been able to watch The Whole Bloody Affair, which I really, really want to see. I think the general consensus is that Volume 1 is stronger than Volume 2. I don't really feel that. There's definitely more action. Like Volume 1 has the anime sequence that people love, and it also has the whole Crazy 88 fight, which is one of the best action sequences ever made, honestly. That Crazy 88 fight. Tarantino brought in Yuen Woo-ping, legendary fight choreographer and action director, to handle that sequence. And then I think Yuen Woo-ping ended up saying that Tarantino pretty much had it covered himself, so he didn't really end up doing all that much, I think is what they said. But regardless, they made a good team. Zoe Bell, the aforementioned incredible Zoe Bell, who I'm a huge fan of, just independently on her own, was Uma Thurman's stunt double on this, and that's how her and Tarantino became associated and why she's in his other movies. I didn't mention her cameo in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but it's cool to see her there too. I loved seeing her in Malignant recently. I think it is A tier. I love that Sonny Chiba has such a good role in this, especially a role where he's not doing action. I know he's older and whatnot, but if you look at Sonny Chiba's career, it's all action. It's him you watch the Street Fighter, it's him making goofy faces and popping people's eyeballs out of their heads and stuff. You see him in Kill Bill, and it's a touching, dramatic, emotional part, and it really shows how talented he is as an actor. Oh, I forgot to show for Django that I have the Django graphic novel thingies. I haven't actually read all of this one. This is the Django Zorro crossover. If you didn't know that was a thing, that's a thing. Django and Zorro teamed up. Yeah, that's where I rank these movies. I feel pretty set in stone on these rankings. You can let me know how wrong I am in the comments if you want, or just tell me where you'd rank them. Do you hate Death Proof and From Dusk Till Dawn? You can let me know why. We can have a constructive conversation about it potentially. Maybe you think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood should be in the S, or maybe you think Django or Kill Bill should be in S. Who knows? Maybe you hate Tarantino and think all his movies are garbage. That's fine too. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Thanks for watching. Check out my other tier list. Subscribe right here to Brickwall Pictures, and check out all the other stuff I do. On the screen here, you'll see links to my homage breakdown videos for Tarantino's films. Check those out. I think you'll enjoy those if you enjoyed this tier list. Thanks for watching. Bye.